Now we're going to go ahead and install our plywood trim ring. This bears the actual hatch that we will stick on top of this. Once we have this installed, we will install the actual metal trim kit. So these pieces of wood right here, you want to leave those on until the installation is complete. These has notch to go in between the rails, so you'll know you're 100% on. So do not remove them before installing. On this application, since I just cut the decking to fit, I had to cut off the little plywood ears that hung over. That's basically for if you're starting fresh and you got a whole new decking you're replacing, you can just go ahead and set it on top of the framing and then install it, and it will work out just right. So as of right now, we're gonna go ahead and install this. And when we do install this, we're gonna be using shims to basically to get a solid backing. Then we're also going to be using the 3.5-inch screws they supply for us. So now that we have finished installing our plywood trim ring, and so now they do supply you with the screws to fasten all this in. They're 3.5-inch screws. You have 8 on either side, then you have 6 on the front. And now, before you do install this, while you're doing the framing and all that, triple check all squares. So basically, whenever you're putting the framing down, let's make sure everything's square, because then if it's not, it's going to throw everything off and make everything more difficult. So one method that you could use is you could do a 3-4-5 method. And the way that method would work is you start from one corner, you measure across 3 foot this direction, and you start from this corner and measure out 4 foot to this direction. Now between these 2 points, you're going to end up with 5 foot, and so that's absolutely square. If you're a little bit off, you just adjust either direction to make that 5 foot. This method could be used in any numbers of 3, 4, 5. So if the unit's just a little bit smaller, you know, it will work as well. And you can also use a framing square. Don't rely 100% on that framing square unless you have a larger one, but the 3-4-5 method is solid all the way around. Now this trim kit ring, plywood ring kit, can handle up to 350 pounds. And so now we're all fastened in here. We're all solid. We stuck some shims in where we had to, just to make sure when we do stick our screws in, it's not going to suck the actual plywood in further than it's necessary. So we want to make sure it's a solid bearing all the way around on the hatch, which we do have. And so we're going to go ahead and start installing the trim kit right now. All right, so now we checked our clearances down below, so we have our hatch placed where we want it. We have our 3/16-inch gap all the way around it. So we came up here and we are tight in some areas. So we're gonna trim these areas up. We do want an 1/8-inch gap all the way around the hatch here, so therefore it has no hang-ups. So we're on the second floor. We have double checked our gaps all the way around our hatch. We are clear all the way around. So I will emphasize on making sure you do have those gaps. you don't want any kind of binding on this hatch here. The elevator has a safety that when it comes through, if it feels more than 20 pounds of stress, it will shut the elevator down. For a moment, the customer will no longer be able to come up. They will have to go back down. And so we don't want to cause any kind of frustration or any of that. You would have to come back and obviously fix that, and coming back on your job to fix a problem like that could be quite time consuming for yourself. So definitely make sure this is gapped. Let's do it right once, and so we don't have any callbacks. And so as of right now, we're gonna go ahead and install our guiders. I got a 16th inch drill bit, and what we wanna do is we wanna get our guide even, and then we want to have about a 16th to a little bit over a 16th gap in between there. And we're going to do it on both of them. So once we have it where we want it, we're going to go ahead and pre-drill a hole right in the dead center. So therefore, if we don't do this pre-drill hole, it's liable to shift the actual bracket, and so then we won't have our 16th inch gap. So we got one hole. I'm going to go ahead and set one screw. So as you can see, just by setting that one screw, tweaked it just a little bit. So we're gonna loosen it up, get it right where we want it, and then we'll go ahead and drill our second hole. I like to go ahead and do it diagonal and get that set up. Got that hole drilled. So now that bracket's set. Now we can go ahead and pre-drill these other two holes. We do have our 16th inch gap, and now we're gonna come over to the second one and do the same thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and explain how we went ahead and did our trim kit. Our trim kit is complete as of right now. I want to go over a few little things, the easiest thing that works for myself. So when you do your trim kit, do the upper half first. What I like to do is go ahead and just lay my corners in and then stick my centerpiece in. Once I get my centerpiece in, I go ahead and drill a couple holes on the top side of it, and I'll actually put these little trim nails that they supply you with in there, one in each side, to hold that, and then go ahead and then you go ahead and take your corners and scoot it tight against this centerpiece, and then throw a nail in both sides of these. Hold those in place. And then once you get to the side, go ahead and drill you about 3 holes, since these are obviously longer, so drill about 3 holes. Use these little nails and hold that in place. Once we have the upper side completed, we'll come down below, and then we'll go ahead and take our corners and we'll slip them all behind our upper corners. And once we have them slipped behind, if you let go of them, they'll fall out. So what I like to do is go ahead and stick a screw in here, you know, just in the corners. Go ahead and get it held in place. Once you have both corners supported by your screws so they don't fall out, go ahead and just slip your centerpiece in. Line it up with everything. Now we're not going to stick any screws in here yet, so what we do is go ahead and just drill a few set holes, and we'll use the little white trim nails they supply you with, and we'll just tack them in, and that we don't hammer them all the way in. Just leave a little bit out of the head so you can get a hold of it if necessary. So we have those just tacked in just a little bit, just to hold that, and then we'll move to the sides. Once we move to the sides, get it held up, get it lined up with the corners and the upper sheet, and then go ahead and get you a couple set screws or set nails in here as well. Just go ahead and tack them in halfway. Move to the other side, do the same thing. Once we have everything up in there, and then we're going to go ahead and come back and get our corners. We're going to pull our corners where they fit tight in both seams. Once we have those sitting tight, and then we'll go ahead and stick these screws in first. Well, actually, we'll have to pull this screw out, and then we'll set these 2 screws first where they're tight. Once you have the corner set tight to the rest of the trim kit, and then you can go ahead and go back and screw it all the way off, and go ahead and tack in your nails all the way. Now, I've installed the trim kit, and so now I went ahead and reinstalled the upper hatch, and went ahead and got it all completely installed. So we have the guides installed. Now I did pre-drill those holes up there for those guides, just so they were held off the rail, the 1/16 of an inch. So I'm satisfied with what I've done, and so we're gonna go ahead and move on with installing the rest of the elevator.